In 1899, Britain and Egypt established the Anglo-Egyptian Condominium to jointly rule Sudan after defeating the Mahdist state. The British held dominant control, treating northern and southern Sudan as separate regions. In the north, they developed infrastructure and education, reinforcing Arab Islamic identity. In the south, they limited northern influence, encouraged Christian missionaries, and governed through local tribal leaders, fostering a distinct African and Christian identity. This administrative division deepened ethnic and religious divides. The British also exploited resources and suppressed uprisings, while Egypt's role remained largely nominal. By the 1940s, rising Sudanese nationalism pushed for independence. In 1955, as independence neared, southern fears of northern domination sparked mutinies, setting the stage for the First Sudanese Civil War. The condominium ended with Sudan's independence on January 1, 1956. Sudan gained independence from the Anglo-Egyptian Condominium on January 1, 1956, becoming a sovereign nation with Khartoum as its capital. The northern-dominated government, led by Arab elites, centralized power and promoted Arab Islamic policies, sidelining southern Sudan's African, Christian, and animist populations. Southerners, fearing marginalization and unrepresented in the new government, demanded greater autonomy or federalism. Tensions escalated due to the government's failure to honor promises of equitable power sharing made during pre-independence negotiations. In 1955, just before independence, southern discontent erupted into mutinies, marking the start of the First Sudanese Civil War. The legacy of colonial policies, which had governed North and South separately, left deep ethnic and religious divides, setting the stage for decades of conflict and eventual division. The First Sudanese Civil War began in 1955, just before Sudan's independence from the Anglo-Egyptian Condominium on January 1, 1956. Sparked by southern mutinies, particularly the Taurit Mutiny, in August 1955, the conflict arose from southern fears of northern domination. The northern-led government in Khartoum, controlled by Arab elites, imposed Arabization and Islamization policies, marginalizing the South's African, Christian, and animist populations. Southern rebels, organized as the Anyanya movement, sought autonomy or secession, fighting against government forces. The war saw widespread violence, displacement, and economic neglect in the South. Estimates suggest tens of thousands died. International mediation, led by Ethiopia, culminated in the Addis Ababa Agreement in 1972, granting Southern Sudan limited autonomy under a southern regional government. This temporarily halted the conflict, but failed to address underlying ethnic and resource tensions, setting the stage for future strife. The First Sudanese Civil War began in August 1955, months before Sudan's independence on January 1, 1956, when southern soldiers in Taurit mutinied against the northern-dominated government in Khartoum. Southerners, primarily African and Christian or animist, feared marginalization under Arab Islamic rule, as the government ignored promises of federalism and equitable power sharing. The mutinies grew into a broader rebellion led by the Anyanya, a southern guerrilla movement seeking autonomy or independence. The northern government responded with military campaigns, targeting southern civilians and exacerbating ethnic tensions. The war, fought mainly in southern Sudan, caused widespread displacement and thousands of deaths. Both sides faced internal divisions, with southern factions often fragmented. International involvement was minimal, though some Southerners sought support from neighboring countries. By the late 1960s, exhaustion and changing political dynamics in Khartoum, particularly after Jafar Nimeri's 1969 coup, opened the door to negotiations. The war ended with the Addis Ababa Agreement in 1972, granting Southern Sudan limited autonomy and integrating Anyanya fighters into the national army, temporarily halting the conflict but leaving underlying grievances unresolved. In 1978, large oil reserves were discovered in southern Sudan, primarily in the Bentiu area by the American company Chevron. This discovery intensified existing tensions between the northern government in Khartoum and the southern population. The northern-led regime, dominated by Arab elites, sought to control the oil fields, viewing them as a critical economic resource. The government redrew administrative boundaries to place oil-rich areas under northern jurisdiction, undermining the autonomy granted to the south under the 1972 Addis Ababa Agreement. This move fueled southern resentment, as communities saw little benefit from the resource while facing displacement and environmental degradation. The oil discovery escalated economic and political stakes, contributing to the breakdown of the peace agreement and setting the stage for the Second Sudanese Civil War, which began in 1983. The struggle over oil revenue became a central issue in Sudan's North-South conflict, deepening the divide that eventually led to the country's division. The Second Sudanese Civil War began in 1983, when the northern government, led by President Jafar Nimeri, abrogated the 1972 Addis Ababa Agreement, which had granted southern Sudan limited autonomy. Nimeri's imposition of Sharia law across the country and his redrawing of boundaries to control oil fields in the south, discovered in 1978, provoked widespread southern resistance. The Sudan People's Liberation Army movement, SPLA-M, led by John Garang, formed to fight for southern autonomy or independence, uniting various southern ethnic groups, primarily Dinka and Nuer, against the Arab-dominated government in Khartoum. The war saw intense fighting, with the government using aerial bombings and militias, while the SPLA-M controlled large swathes of the south. Famine, displacement, and atrocities, including the targeting of civilians, resulted in an estimated 2 million deaths and 4 million displaced. Oil revenues, exploited after 1999, fueled the conflict, enriching the government and enabling arms purchases. Internal SPLA-M splits, particularly between Garang and Riek Machar in 1991, complicated the southern cause. International involvement grew in the 1990s, with the US, Norway, and others pushing for peace. After prolonged negotiations, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, CPA, was signed in January 2005, granting Southern Sudan autonomy for 6 years and a referendum on independence. The CPA ended the war, paving the way for South Sudan's independence in 2011, but left unresolved issues that later fueled conflict within the new nation. The Comprehensive Peace Agreement, CPA, signed on January 9, 2005, in Naivasha, Kenya, ended the Second Sudanese Civil War, 1983-2005, between the Northern Sudanese government in Khartoum and the Sudan People's Liberation Army movement, SPLA-M, led by John Garang. Facilitated by international mediators, including the United States, Norway, and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, the CPA addressed core grievances fueling the conflict. It granted Southern Sudan autonomy for 6 years, establishing a government of Southern Sudan with Juba as its capital, led by Garang. The agreement mandated a 2011 referendum for Southerners to vote on independence or unity, while providing for power sharing in a national unity government, with the SPLA-M holding 28% of positions. It also outlined wealth sharing, allocating 50% of Southern oil revenues to the South, and created a framework for security, integrating SPLA fighters into a joint military. The CPA addressed border disputes, notably in Abyei, allowing a separate referendum, though this remained unresolved. The agreement reduced hostilities but faced challenges, including Garang's death in a helicopter crash in July 2005, which raised tensions and ongoing skirmishes in contested regions. The CPA's implementation, monitored by the United Nations, paved the way for South Sudan's overwhelming vote for independence in January 2011, leading to its secession on July 9, 2011. Despite its success in ending the war, the CPA left unresolved issues such as border demarcations and oil field disputes, contributing to post-independence conflicts between Sudan and South Sudan. The South Sudan independence referendum, held from January 9 to January 15, 2011, was a key outcome of the 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement, CPA, which ended the Second Sudanese Civil War. The referendum allowed southern Sudanese to vote on whether to remain part of Sudan or become an independent nation, organized under international supervision, including the United Nations and African Union. The process saw a turnout of over 97% of registered voters in southern Sudan. An overwhelming 98.8% voted for independence, reflecting deep-seated desires for self-determination among the South's predominantly African, Christian, and animist populations, who had faced decades of marginalization by the Arab-dominated government in Khartoum. The referendum was largely peaceful, though tensions persisted in contested border regions like Abyei, where a separate referendum was delayed. The results were announced on February 7, 2011, and on July 9, 2011, South Sudan officially became an independent nation with Juba as its capital, led by President Salva Kiir. The referendum marked the culmination of decades of conflict driven by ethnic, religious, and resource disputes, particularly over oil fields, but left unresolved issues, including border demarcations and oil revenue sharing, leading to subsequent tensions between Sudan and South Sudan.